Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving deeper into the philosophy of Spinoza, a thinker who continues to fascinate and challenge us centuries later. If you caught my previous video, you'll remember we touched on his ideas about free will and determinism, which is often the go-to entry point for understanding his work. It's a classic theme, and it's accessible for newcomers, but in that video, we only scratched the surface of Spinoza's profound doctrine and his unique worldview. That's why I'm excited to bring you this follow-up, a more detailed exploration to clarify, expand, and deepen those initial ideas. We'll build on what we discussed, unpacking concepts that deserve a closer look to truly appreciate the genius of this 17th century philosopher. For a quick recap, Baruch Spinoza was a Dutch philosopher of Portuguese Jewish descent, born in 1632 and passing in 1677. His radical views on religion led to his excommunication from the Jewish community in 1656, a harsh punishment that underscores how controversial his ideas were. Spinoza's conception of God deviated dramatically from traditional Judaism and monotheism in general, so much so that he chose not to publish his magnum opus, the Ethics, during his lifetime. His other major work on the subject, the Theological Political Treatise, was released under a pseudonym. He knew full well that openly sharing his unconventional take on divinity could bring serious repercussions, so he exercised caution, keeping his most explosive thoughts under wraps until after his death. The big question we're tackling here is, what exactly does Spinoza reject in the classical conception of God? Let's start there, as it's the foundation for everything else. The first major disagreement Spinoza has with traditional views is the notion that God is a being endowed with a personal will, a divine plan, or intentions. Essentially, that humanity is the product of some grand, purposeful design. This anthropomorphic view attributes human-like qualities to God: emotions, thoughts, desires, and reactions. Think about the Bible's depictions in the Old Testament: a vengeful God, a wrathful deity, an unforgiving judge. These are all sentiments that Spinoza argues belong solely to finite, imperfect humans, not to a perfect, infinite being like God. In essence, Spinoza is critiquing the anthropomorphism of God, the tendency to project human traits onto the divine, creating God in our own image. You've probably heard the famous line from Genesis, "God created man in his own image." Well, Spinoza flips this on its head, accusing humans of remaking God in their likeness. It's a limited, reductive vision that fails to grasp the true essence of divinity. So, let's lock this in as Spinoza's primary beef with monotheism, this human-centric projection onto God, which he sees as utterly incompatible with God's real nature. Now, why does this projection pose such a problem? Because, by definition, God is perfect and infinite. We're not debating God's existence here. We're examining the concept itself. God, as the ultimate being, cannot possess the flaws of imperfect, finite creatures like us. Spinoza demonstrates this brilliantly with examples. Take desire, for instance. Traditional views suggest the world was created out of God's desire or will. But Spinoza counters, a perfect being can't have desires. Desire signals lack. It's the mark of absence, of something missing. Remember Plato's Symposium, where Diotima explains desire through the myth of the androgens? Humans were once whole, split into halves, and desire is the drive to reunite with our missing part. Whenever you desire something, be it physical, intellectual, or spiritual. You seek union with it. Sexual desire leads to physical oneness. Curiosity satisfies through intellectual union, appropriating knowledge into your being. Desire is always about reunification, implying prior separation. But for God, there's no exteriority, no lack, nothing missing. To say God desired to create the world presupposes imperfection, that God needed something to complete himself. This creates a logical contradiction. How can God be perfect, yet require creation to fulfill a void? Let's extend this to emotions. Portraying God as vengeful or angry implies he's no better than us, subject to the same impulses and contingencies. For Spinoza, this is nonsense. It reveals only our limited perspective. We think from our human standpoint, which is natural, but claiming our projections as absolute truth is the error. And Spinoza knew this critique wouldn't sit well with religious authorities. They rely on a fearsome emotional God to maintain control, a deity who punishes misbehavior, doles out judgment, and dangles heaven or hell. If God suddenly has no feelings, no desires, no plans, how do you enforce moral behavior? It risks anarchy. Do as you please, it doesn't affect me. So, in Spinoza's view, God has no effects, no desires, no projects, no will. God simply is existing in pure being. God expects nothing from us because expectation implies want, and want implies dependence. God depends on nothing. Freud might say God isn't our father figure to fear or worship. Instead, our classical God reflects human nature more than divine. We project our desires for respect, submission, recognition, and devotion onto God. But really, we're seeking those from each other. Moving to Spinoza's second major disagreement, in traditional conceptions, God is external to the world, separate from nature, a transcendent being above creation. Spinoza rejects this entirely. God isn't the creator in the sense of being prior to or outside the world. That would imply God preceded creation temporally, acting with willful intent, another anthropomorphic schema. Intention first, then realization. Like planning a vacation to Spain. You conceive the idea, then book tickets, and go. But for Spinoza, this doesn't hold because God and the world are one and the same. Everything in existence, this microphone in front of me, the tree outside my window you're listening right now, is an expression, a manifestation, a reflection of God. The famous phrase, Deus sive natura, God or nature. God equals nature. They coincide perfectly. To unpack this, we need to delve into Spinoza's core doctrine, the substance and its attributes. Substance is Spinoza's term for God, the essence of all things, the principle underlying everything. Etymologically, substance means what stands under, not a material compound, but the foundational reality behind the physical world. Attributes are properties of this substance, specific ways of perceiving or considering it, like viewpoints on the same entity. Let me illustrate with an analogy, and remember, analogies are imperfect but helpful. Imagine a red rose with its stem, thorns, and petals. If I show it to you and ask for a description, you might say, it's red, focusing on its visual aspect, color, and shape. Now, blindfold someone and let them touch it, the prickly stem, the soft petals. They're describing it tactily, through texture. Add smell. The rose's fragrance is another property. Each sense, sight, touch, smell, offers a different characterization of the same rose. None alone defines it fully. Omitting one gives a partial view. This is like attributes in Spinoza. ways to approach the substance. Depending on the attribute, you engage the object differently, but all point to the same essence. Think of the fable of the 6 blind men and the elephant. One touches the side and calls it a wall, another the tusk, a spear, the trunk, a snake. Each perspective is valid but incomplete. Spinoza says the substance, God, has infinite attributes beyond our finite comprehension. Humans can only grasp 2: extension, matter, the physical, and thought, mind, the spiritual. Everything we encounter is viewed through these lenses, material or intellectual. Try conceiving another attribute. Spinoza says you can't, because our cognitive makeup limits us to body and mind. This echoes Descartes' dualism of res extensa, extended substance, and res cogitans, thinking substance, but Spinoza unifies them. No separation. They're coexisting attributes within one substance. Like saying a rose isn't just red because its petals are soft. Both traits coexist without conflict. Attributes aren't opposed. They're complementary, infinite in number, though we know only 2. How does Spinoza know this? From God's definition as perfect and infinite, an infinite being must have infinite attributes. We're limited because we're composites of matter and thought, what he calls modes of the substance. To visualize, imagine a large circle as the substance, God, with infinite rays emanating like spokes, each an attribute. I've drawn 2 prominent ones, thought and extension. Connecting them are bridges or segments, showing interaction. These bridges are modes, us, everything existing as composites of attributes. Parallel bridges illustrate Spinoza's parallelism. The order of ideas mirrors the order of things. Around the circle, I've added a glowing halo to represent dynamism. Spinoza's God isn't static, like in Plato or Aristotle. Substance is productive, active. This ties into his distinction. Natura naturans, nature naturing, the active principle, and natura naturata, nature natured, the result. Natura naturans is God as generative force, deploying, creating. Natura naturata is the finite world we inhabit, like a child, born from parents, naturata, then becoming a parent, naturans. No voluntary creation, it's God's power manifesting. Everything that is what can be, potency realized. We're not just calling nature God to dodge controversy. Spinoza distinguishes within the substance, generative principle, and its manifestation. He's monist. Body and mind aren't separate. They're the same under different attributes. Not atheist or materialist, he transcends those labels. Finally, linking to free will. Everything's determined by causality, affecting bodies and ideas alike. Human freedom is relative, gained through understanding causes, acting from our nature, not external forces. God's freedom is absolute, free necessity, acting solely from one's nature, self-determined, not in determinacy, but necessity, being what one must be. God has no choice but to be. His essence and existence coincide. In closing, Spinoza urges us to know ourselves, align with our nature, and realize our potential. That's the path to freedom. Thank you.